I think all of you are aware that we have a partnership with College Park. It's called Empowering the State. In that program, we share a number of things, and one of the things we share is a common vice president for research who represents both of our universities in stimulating research. Dr. Lori Lacasio was that previous person. Dr. Lacasio is waiting to be confirmed as the new director of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, if some of you know that, which is a major organization in Rockville and with whom we have a good relationship. So she's gone on to greater things. Dr. Ball is a neuroscientist, was dean at College Park in the School of Social and Sciences. They have such a funny name, BSOS. I know by BSOS, and he's already joined us in College Park to act as our common vice president for research. And for those of you who didn't see it, you will also know that we report our research together with College Parks, and we're at about the $1.1 billion of expenditures a year, which is very, very high, puts us up in really the top, certainly in the top 10 of public institutions and top 20 in private institutions. So we've done very, very well on that. So I think you should be pleased with that. So with that, I'll stop the talking and do the listening. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Again, as I'm told to do. Okay, Dr. Ball will be with me on face-to-face Thursday at 2, okay, where he'll talk about strategies, what he's about, where we're headed with research funding, et cetera. So that's this coming Thursday. So with that, I shall stop and happy to answer questions or refer them to my very able associates here. So you can't just sit there. It's a town, yes.
Is UMB working with Baltimore City? Because it just seems that the crime is getting worse and worse. And the other night they had someone at our garage who was robbed. Luckily it wasn't at gunpoint, but a lot of us just don't feel safe downtown anymore.
So the question is, are we working with the city on violence in the city? And I want to say the answer is yes, but not enough. And so Dean Tobin is here. Dean Postmus is on the virtual program. Donald, do you want to make any comments about the program we've put together? I'm sorry.
I'm happy to, but I think we've been spending some time at UMB looking at what the different strengths are here in the violence prevention work, and are moving forward to trying to do a collaborative effort with the school social work law and shock trauma to see if there are ways that we can help get to some of the early stages of crime prevention. And so that's an initiative I think we hope will be moving forward and be announced in the near future. I guess I was allowed to announce it since he called on me.
And I would add that there was a face-to-face a month ago with Kyla Liggett-Creel, who has put together a very innovative program with our police force, particularly on Utah Street, and ways to work with the individuals there to help them have a future for their lives. We have a lot of activity in our community engagement center, but the fact of the matter is we're just barely scratching that surface. So I think it's a very valid question and obviously something we need to spend more time on. Anybody else? There are a lot of programs around the schools that are involved in violence prevention. There's a Donald.
So I would just say one of the exciting things we did about 2 years ago, and it's not really on this exact point, is our Rebuild, Overcome, and Rise Center, which is a UMB center. And we did exactly what we talk about here. So it was started with 3 lawyers, 2 social workers, and a nurse to help victims of crime. And we're one of the only supporters of gunshot victims in Baltimore. So that's the backside. That's the stuff that UMB has a lot of expertise in, but it's really fun to see that collaborative effort having such amazing success.
But keep that question coming, you know, that's one we've got to keep in the front of our minds. Yes.
That crime is not just arresting people, it is all of the things to keep people from becoming criminals. And our police force is doing a really good job with the PALS program, meeting students and kids that live in the neighborhood and making them feel like they can be comfortable with police officers. And so I have to give credit to Chief Leone and making that a priority for his police department.
Yeah, and the other priority I would point out is the live near you work. Mary, why don't you bring that back to Dr. Rhodes and let her just brag about that program for a minute? Because again, that's getting into the community and helping that community.
There is a group of us, many of which are in this room, who reinvigorated the program in 2018. And since February of 2018 through the end of the last calendar year, 63 of our employees purchased homes through the Live Near Your Work program. We hit our $1 million mark. So they live in Southwest Baltimore. And what amazes me is you look at the span of education. We have people from GEDs to PhDs. We have 79% of the employees being women who now have the opportunity to establish personal wealth. 55% of the people are people of color that have purchased homes. It's a wonderful asset that we have available to our employees, and we're going to keep doing more exciting things with it to give it another shot in the arm.
Okay, how about other questions? Yes, Becky.
Hello. You mentioned the historical review of named buildings. Is there a thought about that same process being applied to future gifts? How are gifts of names looked at to say, actually, we want your name on the building moving forward, or a name in a space moving forward?
Did you say we want or we don't want?
Being able to make a decision that you do. The dollars are nice,
Right.
And I'm talking about future gifts.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So there is a Regents policy which we are going to adhere to. In the past, we've adhered to it. In the future, we're going to adhere to it too. And that basically says that there needs to be a fairly extensive investigation, background check, whatever you would like to call it, of any potential big kind of donor to ask exactly that question. And so there will be circumstances where we will decline. I don't know that we've come across that yet, Jim. Jim, do you know in the system whether, I think that has happened in the university system?
Yes, I'm not sure about the system, but it hasn't happened at UMB. We have brought forward names where we've done the background research and taken it to the Board of Regents for approval, and all of the ones we've brought forward have been approved. The other aspect of the policy is if it later comes to light that there is a problem, we have the ability to take somebody's name off a building. So that's part of the policy as well.
And I think it's part of our agreements too, that there's a line in there about that eventuality.
Yes, correct. Well, in the newer agreements, yes.
In the newer agreements, that's right. How about other questions? Yes, again.
Oh, sorry. Now that we don't have to wear masks and we can have parties and things like that, at the campus center, do they have the catering back where you can hold events there?
So Flav, I saw Flav here. Flav.
Yes. Please order catering. Yeah. It depends on the room. So the campus center, as you know, has conference rooms all the way up to the ballroom, and each room has a capacity limit. Yeah. It's online, you can check.
Yes.
Okay, parking and transit question. The Pearl Street garage is a back exit that closed during the pandemic, and it has never reopened. And I have tried working directly with them. I have worked with the chairman of the UMB's parking committee. I have worked with the staff senate, and no one can seem to get any traction on what is like a $45 a day problem. And I would like to know if that's something that maybe a phone call from the president could get some traction on, so we could open up the back door and get people home quicker.
Thank you for that. And actually, there's a more powerful way we could do that than the president. Dawn?
So this is new information to me, and I don't know if Robert is online and he can put a message in the chat that might explain it, but I will do that as a takeaway. And if you can give me your name and information, I will get back to you.
Okay. Yes, Jessica in the back.
Hi, so going back to the very beginning when you were talking about COVID and how great our numbers are and everything, do you have any information in terms of, is there going to be another booster? What is the great vaccine? I know Dr. Chang's here, so what is the vaccine update?
Dr. Chen, could I impose upon you?
So I have to go out on a limb to answer this question, but this is a very valid question that I think most of America is thinking about. My best projection is that we will probably have to have some sort of booster. It'll probably be timed for the fall, winter. Think of it like something that coincides with our flu shot. That's what I'm thinking right now. There is going to be an FDA meeting coming up in about 2 weeks to discuss this issue, and we might get more information that will bring to light maybe a different timeline than what I discussed, but I think that that's the general thinking for myself, but also some of my colleagues that I've been following as well that also are thinking similarly.
Is that something that you anticipate being like a flu shot where it's every year?
I think that we're thinking that yes, that if we don't have further surges, we will still see what we think is endemic coronavirus, and we will probably have to think about incorporating it like a flu shot annually. So yes, that's our current thinking.
So just remember, his comments do not represent your U.S. government. Okay, they are Dr. Wilbur Chen. But Wilbur, actually, let me ask you a follow-up question. In terms of clinical trials coming up relative to COVID or flu shots, where do you stand and what type of people do you need in those trials?
So I think right now what we know is that the NIH is trying to have additional booster dose studies, and these booster doses would represent the variant viruses, not the original kind of mRNA based vaccine that we have right now. Those are the types of studies that are being planned for the future. They will be perhaps what we call multivalent, which means that they might express the Delta and the Alpha and the original virus spike protein. They might even include the Omicron. Now, this is more recent, and they might not be able to manufacture the Omicron, but again, a multivalent meaning having different spike proteins of these different viruses, might be represented. That's what is probably coming down the pike very soon. And again, people are already talking about a pan or universal coronavirus vaccine, if that could be developed. And that would have to be on conserved regions, basically areas of the virus that don't change much, so that we could have a more universal type of vaccine.
And what types of people do you need in these
Right
trials?
now, we're still looking at healthy volunteers, but again, with these COVID vaccines, with large populations, we still want to continue to look at older adults, children, people who have underlying medical conditions, again, because that's where COVID hits the hardest. So we continue to look at that. Oftentimes, the biggest exclusion is people who have frank immunocompromising conditions, so are on cancer immunotherapies or have a transplant recently of some organ and they're taking potent medications to suppress their immune system. Those are the people that will probably continue to be excluded, but otherwise we have a pretty wide net for the type of people that we're looking to be in our studies. So I think this entire room, 99% might be eligible.
Yeah, one of the wonderful things about the mRNA, the Moderna trial, and I think the Pfizer maybe, was that the amount of underrepresented minority participation in that trial was, do I recall, 45% overall, 30% Hispanic, and another 15 or so African Americans. Does that sound right, Wilbur?
I think that that's pretty accurate. Yeah. And I think our institution, among all the different several hundred across the US, was remarkably among the leading institutions that had the most diversity. So we really were biased toward enrolling the most numbers of people of color. So that's something to be proud of as well. That
Right.
we tried to reflect our Baltimore population very well, and not just have a very homogeneous mix, but we had a very heterologous mix of people.
So they needed people over 40, so I volunteered. They let me in. How about other questions? Alex, from the audience.
We do. We have several audience members with the same or similar questions about telework. So I ask it this way. We received the executive summary results from the Staff Senate survey this morning in our email regarding remote work. And I guess it showed a large number of people that, really want to as much telework as they can. The question is, what's next?
Well, I have one other members to contribute in this. What I would say to you is that, in my opinion, we used a very inclusive process to modify our telework policy. It went through a lot of scrutiny, including the two Senates and many others. And the approach that we have used is to say, it seems reasonable where it makes sense for people to telework a day a week. If you want to telework more and or there's a reason to do that, or it works, that your supervisor has the authority to do that to 2 or 3 days, and then your dean or vice president has the authority to add it to a higher level. The other thing we've taken is the approach that the campus isn't the all-knowing and the all-seeing on this, that it needs to be the school, individual school, the school's dean and leadership to determine what makes the most sense in that school for that set of students and that set of work requirements. So we have, in fact, continued and will continue to rely on the schools to make this determination about what's in the best interest of them and their workers. And then lastly, I noticed in the survey there was a question about what kind of appeal process there is. And there is an appeal process. I don't know whether I'm using the right word. Is that the right word? There is an appeal process for employees who don't feel like they're getting the right evaluation here, that they can go to the next level. And I know that happens in other policies, so that's possible in this policy too. But before I continue to respond, Dr. Ward, Dr. Rhodes, anybody else in the senior staff that has an opinion that they'd like to express?
In the Staff Senate Town Hall earlier this week or last week, there was a lot of consternation over our current telework policy. And I really, really want people to understand that we have a very flexible telework policy. It may, the way it's being implemented in your specific unit may be what you're frustrated with, but your frustration shouldn't be targeted at the policy, because it does allow for a range of agreements to be made across the university, because units are different. You cannot do a one size fits all when you apply this policy.
Dr. Ward?
The other thing I want to say, Dawn is exactly right, but beyond the policy itself, what we're working through is a fundamental shift and change to the way we've always worked. And that is going to have an impact on our culture, on the way we engage with our employees. So I just encourage people to be patient, to exercise some grace. Your supervisors are all wanting to do the right things. The deans want to do the right things. The vice presidents want to do the right things. This is not an issue unique to us. Industry, within higher education, outside of higher education, are all grappling with what we have learned through COVID and what it means for how we work going forward. And so we are trying to, as quickly as we can, be a model institution as it relates to how the flexibility we extend to employees to telework, but this is novel for us. And so we have to find our way because our culture is important to us. We have to come up with policies and practices that are consistent with those core values you see back there. And it's going to take some time. So I would just ask for a little bit of patience as we work our way through.
Okay, Alex? All right, let's bring in Stephen Isaacson, who has a question. Stephen, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Go ahead, Stephen. I'll have to read his question for him. He asks, when graduate students, they intern there, and let me start again. When will graduate student interns be paid at their field placements? Work days are being sacrificed for field hours, and many students are having trouble paying rent.
Dr. Ward, do you want to make a comment on that?
I don't want to speak to and on behalf of the deans, depending on the program you're in, there's fee requirement as a part of your education. And and again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the deans, it's different by discipline, but field experiences are part of your educational program. And there isn't an expectation on understanding that you'll be compensated for that work you're doing in the field as you are learning in the classroom or outside of the classroom. This isn't, field placement isn't employment, I guess is what I'm saying, or it isn't meant to be employment. Now, I know that in some instances, students outside of what is required as a part of the curriculum can find in the summer field placement opportunities where, depending on the agency or the organization, there might be a willingness to pay a stipend or some compensation of sort for students, but that's separate and distinct from the field placement as a part of the curriculum. And so I would like to learn more about the students' particular concern, because sometimes it's unique to the students, but as a matter of principle and practice, students aren't compensated for field placement that's part of the curriculum. And if it's different for some of the other deans, Dr. is shaking his head, so that's at least School of Law. I think in general, that's how I would respond. Again, not knowing the specifics behind the question.
We have another anonymous question about the vaccine requirements. I guess the question is when and if the USM will upgrade the definition of fully vaccinated to include being boosted.
Well, the answer I would give to that is that when the CDC tells us, CDC, right, Wilbur, not the FDA, it's the CDC does that, then we will follow suit. So CDC has been our North Star in this, and we will follow that.
All right, we have one more anonymous question, and if you're watching this remotely, go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A window, and we'll try to get to you. Governor Hogan announced removing the bachelor's degree requirement for many state jobs. Does USM or the university plan to follow that and revisit the requirements on our jobs as well?
Well, I would start by saying I hope so, but I see Dr. Rhodes here. Any opinion on that?
We have not discussed that. Oftentimes when we advertise positions, we have the option of putting actual experience in lieu of education. It's a topic that we have to discuss on a much greater basis to be able to say what our direction is.
No other questions? How about in the audience? I'm sorry, yes.
Hi, I have a lighthearted question. So I get a lot of my information from the ALM newsletter. And I'm just wondering, why doesn't the School of Dentistry have representation in the ALM?
Jennifer. Or Laura, or we got all the communication people here.
So the ELM is a submission process, so everyone can have representation in the ELM. So my thought is maybe the School of Dentistry just isn't submitting their items into the ELM, maybe as some of the other schools or administrative units are. But all the schools have the ability to have their own ELM page that's school specific. So I'll follow up with the School of Dentistry and just see where they are with that and maybe ask them to submit a little bit more.
Yes.
Just quick, any update on the ambulatory building, the new ambulatory building by Packer Pratt?
They're going to build it. I know that, but I don't have it. I mean, I've been on the board meetings and listened that there is going to be a Stoller Tower that's going to include a lot of outpatient services. That is moving ahead. And I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that's correct,
yeah,
isn't
that's
it? Yeah. Yeah. And so that is going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. I want to point out a couple of people standing there in the back because they have helped us immensely get through this whole COVID. And don't go walking away. John Bratt. John, raise your hands so people can see you. I see. You know, it's always hard to do this from up here. I see Chris. See Laura Cathcart, Haley, got it right. And of course, John Cuskar, who's over here to my right. And lastly, the indefatigable, it's a hard word to say, Dean Kersling. Jane, thank you for everything you've done for us. And those of you who got vaccinated on this campus, this group, and particularly Dean Kersling, had a lot to do with it. So thank you for doing all of that. Okay, who did I miss? I'm sorry. Oh, Steve, you're not standing up. That's why I didn't see it. And Steve Deck, who also is a major player in this as well. So thank you all very much. So with that, I guess we're done. So thank you for coming. We're going to have it again. I think this venue works pretty well, don't you? I liked it here. Were the acoustics okay? Well, so maybe we'll do it here more often. So thank you again and best wishes.